You have the best sweaters and shirts, and I I don't know where you get them. I think it's above my pay grade to ask, but
It's actually below your pay grade.
uh,
I did a big concert last year that I got really ridiculous clothing for, and then all of my internet ads became even more ridiculous clothing.
yes, please escalate.
So I just kind of you're sort of seeing the result of like kind of go. I'm like, ooh, that looks good.
Yeah, this is like your Instagram online shopping. They got you.
They got
I've seen some of those outfits, and I just assumed you had really great vintage store skills.
No, no. Well, that too. I mean, like I do a fair amount of like I've always loved kind of like Goodwill rummaging and stuff like that. I have some like art projects that I like get some other stuff for, but I have like a pretty cool Whitney Houston tour t-shirt from like
Oh, nice.
1991 or something that I was like, "Oh man, this is perfect."
That'd have been like bodyguard era, I think.
Yeah, yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So Kyle, maybe we wait one more minute for people to roll in and then get the party started. You
Sounds
want to
good.
set some ground rules first?
Sure. Um, First thing I want to say is you have all helped us break our record for most participants for a webinar. So thank you. That is so exciting. And hello to Dylan from Wheat Ridge. I'm up in Boulder. So, um, yeah, so some ground rules. This is an interactive webinar. It's not just a presentation. Um, However, with this many participants, we usually just have people kind of ask questions in chat or the Q&A. We're going to ask you to restrict your questions to the Q&A tool, please. That helps us manage those questions. You're more likely to get it answered. So yeah, really appreciate that. One of the questions right now is what's the count on the participants? It is up to 587, 588, still climbing. We actually had to up our Zoom plan so that we could accept more participants for this one. Love it. All right. Are there any other ground rules that I'm missing?
No, I think this is supposed to be really interactive, everyone. So
Yeah.
chat with each other, ask questions, don't hesitate. Kyle and Varun here, my colleagues at Chromatic, are going to pull questions to get asked live. We'll be just going back and forth with our audience today.
That's
Um,
right. Oh, and
I'm
just to reiterate, we are recording this, and
yes,
anybody that's registered will get it, and then we'll probably share it as well. So,
absolutely. So yeah, let's kick us off, huh?
please.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen, everyone. All right. Hey, everyone. We're all here today because we make design systems. And they have cool names, maybe something elemental or in a different language. The components are like bulletproof. The docs that you've made are a work of art. And they have all these features, but but agents don't use it properly. They don't use the design systems properly, and we got to ask why, right? Um, we what we want is for agents to reuse components to generate code, and instead they just ignore existing patterns and invent their own. And the whole time they're saying you're absolutely right, uh, and you don't know what to do. So look, the world has changed. The way we learn design systems isn't really suited for today's agents. Agents don't interpret things like humans. They consume context, like metadata, types, and examples. And when that context is flaky, they don't ask questions. They just make things up. And so, our job here is to kind of figure out how to get the information to these agents from your design system in a way that encourages them to actually use the patterns that you've like worked really hard on. So I'm Dominic, the founder of Chromatic, the company behind Storybook. And Brad Frost is joining me today. He's my friend and the author of Atomic Design. I'm sure he needs no further introduction. This live session is about agentic design systems and the underlying structures that power them. The folks in attendance here are leaders and seasoned pros. So again, don't hesitate to react and talk to each other in chat. That's what it's all about. That's the community that we're trying to build here. So before I jump into things, I want to say hello to Brad and really ask you a question, Brad. Like, when I saw you last year, you were the first person to demo AI plus design systems, and you were super excited about it. And I guess like in the intervening period, a lot has changed, right? It went from like I don't think Sonnet 3.5 is released yet. So I want to ask you, like, hey, what breaks first when agents start to use design systems?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. And yeah, we've been picking at this for a while before like MCP and all of that stuff kind of came out. So we've been kind of exploring this terrain, and what breaks really depends on what day. I feel like even today.
Yeah, totally.
But I think that there's still a lot that is involved to get these agents to pick up the appropriate context and to carry it forward, even if it kind of gets the components right. So if you are using web components, for instance, and you have like, DS dash button and stuff like that, it will use those things, but it's often pretty milk toast
Oh yeah,
responses that
totally.
you don't really get like the, oh wow, like this is actually assembled in a way that is smart and matches how you might use it. So there's definitely, like, even if the ingredients are there, there's a lot that gets kind of lost in translation between the two. And then of course then there's just like the multifaceted nature of design systems. So we're obviously talking about the code aspect of it and stuff, but there's like a lot of now these different seams that some of which we're familiar with, right? The design comp into the dev world, uh,
Hmm.
sort of implementation, that's all changing, and there's new seams as kind of agents are being introduced to those. So there's like these seams are opportunities, but this is also where we see those things breaking down because a lot gets lost in translation.
Yeah, that's a really great point. It's like the seams are where the drop off occurs, and
Hmm.
when those seams aren't like seamless, I guess, not
Yeah,
to
yeah,
to use to overdo that analogy, but when the seams aren't actually seamless, the loss in translation, loss in fidelity, just happens, and then so I guess it makes sense to me then that you know the agents get lost all the time, and
yeah,
they get lost in different
yeah.
places.
And we feel that as human beings, right? It's like
Yeah,
we have the lost in translation stuff, which is why for ages we've all just been like, how do we automate, just making this stuff just kind of plug and play, or like how do we automate, make
yeah,
sure that our Figma, environment is in sync with our Storybook environment and vice versa and all that stuff. And so it's like we're used to this kind of lost in translation, and we're
yeah.
reaching for technology to help address it. But then here comes this new paradigm, this non-deterministic paradigm that
Yeah,
actually like
yeah.
gets inventive, and it's helpful in certain ways, but that it's also kind of, you know, takes us a step further back in
Yeah,
other respects. Fascinating.
totally. Um, that's the seam kind of analogy and the translation analogy is a nice segue into where I wanted to like move us next, right? Um, for us in Storybook Land, we're thinking a lot about kind of two different seams and under the branch of structure. So we think that like how far agents can go really depends on your system structure, and that breaks out down into coverage and validation. So coverage tells agents what to reuse. Since agents, as you said, kind of like you really use what's modeled, what's explicitly modeled there, and they don't really they don't have that human judgment layer that we do. We need to make these patterns predictable. That means types, normalized examples, predictable composition rules, and things like test coverage. And the missing patterns, when the patterns are missing, that forces agents to improvise. And almost always the improvisation is like not really what you want. And so, as a part of coverage, once we establish that kind of core coverage, we need to transform it into machine readable context. And this is like the engineering stuff that we're working on that we're going to get to later. Um, uh, this is a critical optimization step because it reduces token usage and increases speed. And when tasks are chained in agentic workflows, any kind of adjustment in speed or token usage actually has a multiplicative impact, a compounding impact as you do the work. Validation, on the other hand, tells agents what to respect. This is where design system teams really enforce their UI standards. Tests must pass. Humans must review. And since we care about production code here, not prototypes, at least on the engineering side, it makes sense to tie what you deem agents' success to concrete validation signals, like tests and human sign-off. So in a nutshell, you need both. You need coverage and validation. Coverage provides the patterns, while validation keeps that code output on track. So, Brad, we just listened to a bunch of we just listed a bunch of considerations. Like, what gaps do you think, or have you found, are like the most overlooked by design system teams?
Yeah, I mean, right now I feel like there are a lot of gaps. I think what we still see is that there certainly in the testing department, teams have certain flavors of tests, but not others. People have, pieces of the puzzle put together. Some things are uneven. Some components are further along, but there's still a lot of kind of, we'll say, discrepancies or inconsistencies kind of even
Yeah,
within things just based on, oh yes, this component was made 3 years ago and we just kind of organically drifted and changed our coding standards. So there's kind of like a lot of stuff that comes with, here's this component library that's ostensibly there to sort of operate as a group, but we tend to see sort of some of that unevenness that
yeah,
that occurs. So I think that like all of the great work that you all have been doing kind of to date around sort of testing and getting like the interactive tests and stuff and other stuff and the visual tests, like it can't just be kind of like one flavor of that stuff. So many of the teams that we've worked with, and I'll admit it, I hate tests myself, but I understand
yeah,
like to
yeah,
get something across the finish line and to sort of actually be able to like launch something with confidence, like you actually need it. But for the longest time, it was just like, oh yeah, like let's just tick the unit test box and like figure out the way to just kind of get the green check box to show up so then we can move on. But I think that as we're entering this new era, it's like, no,
yeah,
no, no, those tests are actually like the sauce for how we can actually say with a degree of confidence that like what these agents are starting to assemble and how they're using them in addition to just human beings, continuing
yeah,
to use them themselves, like that's where we get the like we could actually answer that question, is it good, with a higher degree of confidence. And right now like this is what we're seeing is that those gaps in the tests and in the kind of consistent quality in
yeah.
a component system are feel like the biggest impediments to actually being able to really take advantage of this moment.
I think something you and I talked about in the past is like this idea of like garbage in, garbage out when it comes to design systems, and
Yeah.
like yeah, you can have a button, but if it doesn't like work properly, if it and the things that and the areas that you need it to do, like a human has no hope of like figuring that out, because they're referencing your design system as like this is the bona fide, right? But at the same time, like think about like an agent referencing the design system. They don't even ask questions. They're just going to say like, I
Yeah.
guess I'm going to copy this broken pattern.
Yeah.
um, yeah.
Yes.
Thanks for sharing that, Brad.
Of course.
Uh, so, as you can see, like things aren't really as simple as flipping a switch. If they were, like Brad and I wouldn't be here on stage, like talking to you about operationalizing agentic design systems. Um, and we just talked about like coverage and validation. The next thing to dig into is really a workflow and seeing how the entire system or the entire loop works together. So Brad kind of like foreshadowed this in his earlier response. Um, Look, agents work in a loop, and your design system is just one part of that loop. The loop only works when each step reinforces the next. So let's talk about like the first couple steps. Agents start by referencing your design system patterns, and then they generate code. Right? That code is then tested, and the tests serve as guardrails for the objectively wrong outputs, like functional bugs, like rendering issues, accessibility violations that you need to get resolved, because the agents are just going to reuse that stuff if you don't actually, pass those tests. And when those tests fail, errors and warnings get piped back to the agent to iterate. And what we're working on with Storybook is how to make this part really autonomous, right? Like humans, to respect human time, as Brad says, like you want the agent to do as much work and as much bug resolving as possible before a human has to review it. But once like the humans sign off and the tests have all passed, your validated components then can go back and update the design system. And so that kind of creates this like kind of self-updating record that gives agents kind of up-to-date context the next time they go about building. And so when you have the complete loop, your design system actually is the basis is like the operational kind of like truth for any AI workflows that you want to put it throw at it. And the connective tissue here is MCP. That's probably one of the reasons why a lot of people signed up today. Storybook at Storybook, we're working on an MCP to provide this like connective tissue to every user that every project that has Storybook enabled. And it's the underlying tech that connects these agents to the existing UI patterns that you already have. So with that, I want to welcome my teammate who's actually working on building Storybook MCP to demo this full loop to you all. We're pretty early on. We just launched early access like last week. So what you're seeing is a research preview, and we'll continue to be iterating on this over the next 2 or 3 months. So Kyle, with that, do you want to get on stage and show us what you got?
Good thing. Thanks, Dom. Yeah, I'm Kyle. I'm a DX engineer on the Storybook team, and we've been building an MCP server for Storybook that will look at your components, extract their prop types, their API, and especially the stories that you have, which kind of tells the agent, here's how to use the component. So if you think about it, you've put all of this work into your Storybook to make your stories and like really make sure those stories are good and well tested. And now the agent can take advantage of that work too. So I'm gonna show you a demo. So let me share my screen. All right, you might be seeing some Q&A in chat. Let me move that out of the way. Okay, you should see an app called Meal Drop, I hope.
Yep.
Okay, great. So if you've been in our webinars before, you've very likely seen this application. It's kind of like an Uber Eats or DoorDash clone that Jan, one of our Storybook engineers, built to demo Storybook and Chromatic, and I've modified it a little bit. So I made it a mono repo so that the shared components are in a package, like a UI package, and then the rest of the app, like the pages itself, is in an app. And I did that so that I could show you how and the MCP server can work like across packages like that. So first, I've got a storybook running for my shared components packages. So this has like some design tokens in it, of course, the button that everybody knows and loves, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And then it is running an MCP server. So when you use this MCP add-on, it adds a /MCP route to your storybook, which is going to redirect to the component manifest in a second. And so this is really the heart and soul of the work is it only works with React right now, but after we get through with this experimental phase, we're going to expand it to other renderers, of course. But anyway, what it does is this is extracting all the information from it. And the engineers really went ham on this thing, and they built not just a JSON output, which is what the agent reads, but this nice HTML viewer. And so we can see, for example, like I'll filter down to just the infos, and so it's telling me, hey, this component doesn't have a description. You should write a JS.doc comment above the export, giving it a description so that the agent can know what this component is for, which is great advice, and I wish I would have had time to do it. But I think the agent will do okay without it. Let's see. So that's the UI package. That's that storybook. I also have a storybook for the app. And so you can see this is like really just pages. We've got like a home page here. And we have, looks like I have some missing global styles. And we have a restaurant detail page. And many others, but let's just look at that for a second. Okay, so that's our setup that we're working within. This one also, by the way, has a running MCP server. Let's just go straight to the component manifest.
Yeah.
So this
so to
one,
confirm, there are two separate
yes.
storybooks. One for components that is a design system basically, and the other is like your project storybook.
Yeah, exactly right. And because there's two different storybooks, there's actually two different MCP servers. I'm going to show you how it's configured in a second. But you can see that this one has like pages and then some page-specific components. So when I'm doing this development work that I'm about to show you, it should have context for all of those things as it does its work. So let's switch to my editor here. So in my editor, I'm using VS Code with Copilot and Claude Sonnet 4.5 as my agent. And so I've configured two MCP servers, one for the app. So that's that local server there. And then one for the UI. That's that local server there. And these MCP servers, just the concept in general, is a set of tools. And ours have two different tool sets, we call them. So groups of tools. One of those tools is for documentation. And so that's going to look at like the list of components that are available just in the whole thing. And then detailed information about each of those components. And you're going to see the agent call both of those in a second. There's also a development tool set, and that basically makes the agent an expert storybook developer. And so it can write stories like the best of us. All right. So I have a prompt here. Do I need to zoom in a little bit? I'm guessing I'm.
Yeah. Can you zoom in a little bit?
How about that?
That's good.
Okay. It's a little tight, but I think we can make it work. Oh, and then I also just have this really, really basic agents file, just kind of telling it how to work. And I basically just say like, hey, use that MCP server, and then make sure to create stories. And then this is my personal preference, but I get the like, you're absolutely right, and all that stuff drives me nuts.
Yeah,
okay,
it absolutely drives me nuts.
So I have a prompt here. Add a customer reviews component. It should contain multiple reviews. Each review should display an avatar, name, star rating, and review text. Use placeholder images and friendly content. So, I'm going to do that. So you can see right away, it's going to run the list all components from my mail drop UI. And I go ahead and do that allow each time just to make sure that we actually catch that it's happening. So now it's going to get detailed documentation for the components that it thinks it needs. So it looks like it needs stars. I can't scroll sideways. Typography. Yeah, stars and typography.
So the list part like gets you the list, and now it's asking for follow-up metadata. So it's
That's right.
optimizing its own context, what it asks for to deliver the best result the fastest.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess while it's working, I'll kind of explain that a little bit. So
Hmm.
without the MCP server, what it would have to do is actually go like spelunking into your node modules and just do grep searches across raw source code. With the MCP, it has structured data that is optimized for this exact purpose. And so to get the broad picture, it just gets a list with bare minimum of metadata. But then to actually get like the API and the usage examples or the stories of the component, it looks at uses a different tool for that. And it just makes it like as optimized as possible, both in terms of time and in terms of the tokens that are consumed by the work.
Yeah, and we've done a bit of research on like further token optimization with formatting too, um, kind of exploring like things as trivial, what that sound is trivial is formatting, like XML versus Markdown versus Tune versus JSON. Um, that has a pretty distinct impact in our evals on like how quickly and how many tokens an agent uses. So that's all included in Storybook MCP as well.
Yeah.
Those
Okay, so
optimizations, that is.
now So up until now, we've seen it use the documentation tool set instead of tool. Now this is the development one. So it not only made stories, you can see over here, it created a review.stories.tsx. It not only did that, but now it's going to actually give me links to those stories.
So this is where like the human validation, like validation occurs or
Yes.
verification occurs at the first step. And I think for me, the utility here is like this gives me directional correctness. Like once the local test pass and I get to see all this stuff, I'm like, oh, okay, like this is about right.
Yeah.
But Kyle, yeah, click on one of these.
So yeah, so this did a great job. It not only made customer reviews, it made an individual review and it made stories for both of them. So let's go look. Um, all
Oh wow.
right.
Yeah, we've
Not
never
too
run this
bad.
before. Yeah, we're seeing that we're doing this all like live.
Amazing. We're doing it live.
So it made story,
Amazing.
it made a default story and made one to display just a single review, two reviews. You can change what the title is apparently. And then for single review, there's like a high rating, a medium rating, a short
Oh, that's
review,
amazing.
and a long
Yeah,
review.
it's exactly what I would do as a developer.
This is really great. And
Oh, look at the controls.
yeah, and I mean that's just Storybook doing its thing, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean it like hooked it up. Can you edit one of those?
I'm sure I can. Jessica Thompson rules.
Oh, cool.
There we go. It's using placeholder images. Let's see. I can change the rating, and there it changes in live time.
Oh, dang. That's I'm blown
This is
away by this.
awesome.
This is the first time I've seen it.
All right. Let's keep going. So I'm not even gonna look at that code yet. I'm just gonna
Can you zoom out
stage
one step,
everything.
Kyle? The chat's
Zoom
asking.
out one step. Sure,
Yeah,
like
zoom out
that.
one. Yeah. Uh-huh.
I'm more than happy to do that. Okay. Let's clean this up. We don't need those either. Okay. So now let's say add a review form component that accepts a star rating and text review. I'm just going to give it a simple prompt like that. Let's see what it does.
So like we're creating the review form now, huh?
Yep. I wanted to do this because this is interactive. The other one was not.
Yeah.
And when it's interactive, it should not just make stories, but make stories that have play functions
Yeah, it's way more
and like
complex.
test that interaction.
Yeah.
It's much more complex.
And just to like, I'll sort of throw some stuff onto the pile here because I think
Please.
that this is the stuff that getting this kind of scaffolding up, getting this stuff assembled, being able to like in the course of an actual meeting with your team, with your
Uh,
stakeholders, with like everybody, with your clients, to be able for them to say, oh, it'd be cool if we could do this.
Yeah.
And then to be able to just do it and see it and have everybody iterating on things live. Like I think that this is one of the things that it's like what we're talking about is really like kind of combining like the rigor of a well-engineered and well-structured coded component library with this real like democratic ability for everybody to be kind of designing in the browser but keeping things on the rails. Like that for me is I think revolutionary in the sense that we've like long been extolling the virtues of getting into code faster, being able to like look at actual product UI versus pictures of product UI.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing here is it's just like, oh yeah, I'd really love to see this and to actually see it. And it's not just some like, you know, hose without anybody holding it, like just kind of generating things or, pulling from the ether. It's
Yeah.
it's using this really well-considered structure that your team has full control over. And I think that that's like really, really powerful. It's like it's again, it's like it's the vibe coding plus like the adult,
Yeah.
responsible.
it's
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 kind of
like
the
the
best of
AI
both
engineering,
worlds.
right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
yeah.
I mean, it
We
moves
kind of
us
think of
away
it,
from. Oh, go ahead, Kyle.
we kind of think of it like I'm sure you've heard the term vibe coding. This kind of graduates it to something closer to vibe engineering, where you're actually able to rigorously check your work pretty well and like keep that human in the loop.
Yeah.
Whereas without this, with vibe coding, like you're kind of overwhelmed because you're just looking at source code. You don't actually have like the output.
Hell, most
Um,
people aren't even looking at the source code when they vibe code. Let's be real.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Me too. I think, and again, it's like there's a time and a place for that, but I think that like what we see in our work, we've worked with like, 10% of like the Fortune 100 and like all of like these like big companies. It's like you're gonna make a giant mess of things. So it's like a lot of these tools are kind of non-starters for a lot of folks that want to be able to use this stuff. And this is where it's like again, just this here's this rigor, the apparatus that is your standards that you have control over, your structure, your sort of test suite, your
Yep.
like
Yep.
you are in the driver's seat still and are able to sort of point these agents like through your organizational standards to
Yeah.
get things done and to not have it go totally off the rails. Like I think it's like that can't be stressed enough that this is actually like for production, right? Like this is actually designed and
Yep.
purpose built for people actually designing and shipping real products that real people use. But to go from
Yeah.
like literal like speaking some words, you prompting a thing and then that thing existing and to be able to sort of be able to say, yep, we could probably like launch this by the, you know, give whatever
Yeah.
time frame you want, hours, days, it's
Let's see. Yeah,
seconds.
I mean,
Yeah, go
let's
for it.
see if we can launch for view form
Yeah.
in the next
Yeah.
couple bit next little bit.
So I did realize I forgot to demo one part of it. I didn't actually prove that it's using the design system. So um, this is within my UI package, so it's just going to use relative imports, but it is reusing button and body on review form. And then for the customer reviews, using heading from typography, and for review, it's using typography and stars. So totally reused what's there. So that's great. Um,
Yeah, there's no
and
magic here.
then I want to go look at our storybook. Hmm. Sometimes I pretty hastily created this monorepo, and so sometimes
I think you might have to
I
just
don't think I
restart the
have things
server.
configured quite right, and I need to build things. What was that, Vern?
Yes, the demo gods have struck Eric. Yep. Live demo
Oh, yeah.
karma rebalancing.
All right, let me restart my storybook.
But yeah, like I think that there's some stuff like while Kyle's like doing his thing, like Dom, like what would be helpful, I think. Oh, there we go.
There
All
we go.
right, never mind.
Okay.
Go
So
for it, man.
let's see. Customer reviews, review form. Not
Oh,
bad.
fascinating.
Yeah,
So we can change the labels, including
that is a
the edit
text
button.
text field too. Like you can barely see it, but oh yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
You
Yeah,
there
hover
we
on it.
go. So
I don't know that that's
that's a great
accessible.
example where it's like, oh, okay, like that is working. Good first shot, but like, oh yeah, like that isn't like the affordance, right? Like the contrast isn't there, right? Even if like the components themselves are accessibly like are built with accessibility best practices. This is like
Yep.
one thing that we run into like all the time working with teams is like we're like, yes, the design system and the component library is this delivery vehicle for accessibility best practices, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the entire product experience is going to be accessible just because it's using these things because of how they get assembled. And this is like, I think
Yeah,
like
it's
a
the
really like
composition.
great, this is like a great example of that. And, you know, whether human or agent created this, uh,
This
this
is
is where that rigor like really kind of comes in that human eye.
This is also a great demo of the importance of reusing your design system because I happen to know there's no text area in these components. There is a text
Uh,
input, there's no text area. So when it had to go off and do its own thing, it's not accessible.
there we go.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, just a super quick demo of a pretty cool feature that Jan also added to Storybook super recently. You can now click on this story menu and like copy the story name or even open it in the editor. So I'm just going to do that. And it's going to open VS Code right to that story file, which is pretty awesome. Let me just
Oh,
keep
that's
all these real
amazing.
quick.
Thank you.
Um, so I was curious. Yeah, it called it with initial interaction, but it didn't actually make me a play function. That's okay. Um, So I mentioned there's two tool sets, right? Documentation and development. But we're going to be building in the next few weeks a testing tool set as well. So for those of you that don't know, we've built testing directly into Storybook. Actually, let's go ahead and do coverage. So what this does is it transforms your stories into real VTest tests. And when I click this button in the background, it's going to pull up a Playwright headless Chrome browser, and it's going to run all those tests with VTest. And because it's VTest, it's going to be pretty fast. So let's do that. And it's going to calculate coverage and make a report for me. And I've got accessibility too. And so it's going to run the accessibility checks through Axe. So the same thing that like the accessibility add-on can do, like in your add-ons here. It's right here. It's going to run those checks. Okay. So all my component tests, the interaction part, that works. I've got decent coverage. I have 4 accessibility errors. Let's check those. So looks like, well, it's a
Ah,
heading order issue.
Ah, yeah, yeah. That makes sense.
So yeah, it looks like this is an H4, and I'm guessing this is probably a H2.
H4. Hmm.
Well, I'm not going to dig into the details of that, but you can see that we've got the information we need to fix
Yeah.
the issue if we wish. Um, I want to continue on with the demo though, because we've created a reusable component, but we haven't actually put it in the app yet. So let's do that. So put the customer reviews with form on the restaurant detail page. Once again, I'm just going to stage that work. I personally find it a lot easier to just use Git to manage the work that was done instead of the whole like keep undo thing that VS Code offers.
Yeah, you're teaching me right now, Kyle. That's seems really handy.
I mean, I think I'm just a OG likes
Yeah.
my tools.
I do use the keep and undo.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get lost in it though.
Yeah. I mean, it can be nice because you can do it like more granular in the file, which is helpful. But
Hey, Kyle, can we jump to the restaurant detail page just to see it working? Like,
oh yeah, that's a great idea. So it imported.
oh no, on Storybook.
Oh, we can also do that. But first, notice it definitely reused what I wanted to.
Yeah.
And then that's here.
Okay, so it's adding stuff,
Put the
and it's
form before the reviews, which yeah, I guess that's what like Yelp and stuff does.
yeah, that's what DoorDash does for sure.
Amazing.
Did it just finish? Like, is it done?
I think so.
Like,
It's gonna do some story work now.
okay,
But again, like seeing that page in action, right? So it's like, here's the thing that everybody, the entire business, right? This is the heart and soul of what one of these companies is doing. They're trying to get reviews, solicit those things. This is the language that the entire product team speaks.
yeah,
And historically, I think kind of even doing sort of rapid prototyping inside of Storybook. And we've done a fair amount of just kind of quickly generate some pages, or like, I shouldn't have said generate, but like whip up some pages just by way of like doing like little includes, even
yeah,
before Storybook, right? Like that was like what we did with Pattern Lab, right? So in the course of a meeting, we'd be able to sort of like stitch things together to actually sort of demonstrate this stuff. But the fact that you can, again, like, I keep painting this picture because I think that this is truly and genuinely like super exciting and revolutionary, is like, if all of us were not all kind of engineering oriented, and you have, your head of sales, you have your chief
yeah,
product officer, you have like your all these different groups of people to say, really love it if the product did this. And then you
yeah,
just run it through this flow that we're looking at right now. And you're like, well, holy crap. Like that's like actually it. Like
yeah,
that's not like a pipe dream. That's like, this is our production code. Like actually sort of making this stuff come to life
yeah. Because you have the
before your
guardrails
very eyes.
from the production code too, right? Like, what you're saying is like that head of sales. Yeah, they don't want to look at an ID, as Jeff in chat is saying, but they're looking at the storybook, and you can like demo it interactively right there for them in the same
Yeah.
meeting.
Like, but they are a sense, like they are
Exactly.
effectively the coders. They are mouth
Yeah.
coding.
Mouth.
They're mouth coding, and then like we kind of
Yeah.
like help like facilitate it. But this is I think like the other thing that why I get so like excited about this stuff is that developers have historically been just abysmally far down the waterfall process, even for agile workflow. It's not agile. Like this whole like
Yeah.
designer developer handoff is depressing and has gone in the wrong direction over the years. And so I think that this what we're looking at here are like really powerful and empowering moments for developers to kind of bring other people into this world. And sure, like we're still like looking at like the, VS Code under the hood and stuff like that, but having the workshop environment of Storybook that actually gives like the visual output is so incredibly like accessible now for
Yeah.
so many people.
Thanks, Brad. Um, yeah, I just want to show off two more things. So one, just really cool. So because Meal Drop was originally engineered by Jan, who is a mocking genius, it uses mocks very thoroughly and consistently. And so it picked up on that and it didn't hard code those reviews in there. It created mock data and then uses it, which is great. It means that Storybook can definitely use that as well. And then the second thing is it gave me a link to a story, but sorry, I went ahead and committed, so it's hard to see, but it didn't actually have to change the story. So even though it didn't update a story file, it still knew that it's helpful to see the output visually.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
So
So
let's see
let's,
that. Can
yeah,
you see it visually?
totally.
In
It's
Storybook.
right here.
Okay, cool.
So
A little jittery,
some
but
visual bugs,
yeah, that's good.
which if this was a real session, we'd definitely address, but I want to show the workflow more than the actual work. So I'm going to keep
Yep.
going. So what I've done while Brad was giving some context and color there is I pushed a branch which kicked off Chromatic for me. And so I wanted to show that because I've shown kind of how there's a human in the loop as you're developing. Um, Oh, I did not finish my point from the tests. So Storybook can run tests now. We're building into the MCP server the ability for the agent to just run those tests for you on your behalf. And our end goal is to have a like kind of self-healing loop so that it'll not only develop for you, any agent could do that. It'll not only develop using your design components, that's what we're showing today, but it'll even run your tests, your component tests, not just type checking, not just linting, run your component tests for you so that you can be sure what you've got is functional.
And
And then the final
that's
step is to make sure that
I,
it's validated in Chromatic and kind of update what this is all based on and make sure that you've got a solid foundation because we all know garbage in, garbage out, right?
yeah.
So if you're gonna
I
let
just
this
want
keep
to
going, please go, Tom.
interject there, Kyle. The difference between like static checks, linting, and component tests are the component tests run in browser. They are the closest thing that you can get to like users like actively like clicking around on your stuff. So the stuff that like it's great that agents can run unit tests, in CLI, but if you want them to simulate browsers or simulate like real user behavior, you need to like render the thing and render your components in a browser and evaluate it there.
Yeah. All right. So just real quick, our build finished. So I'm going to verify those changes. And so you can imagine if I was really working on this and I needed a stakeholder to come in and look at it, it's like, okay, it's very obvious that whole section is new. I'm going to turn it off just so we can turn off the diff, just so we can actually see it. But that, sure enough, that's what we saw locally. So accept that.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's just going to be the same thing on all the pages, which, by the way, we're building something for that too. It's a tricky problem, but we are trying to improve this experience where you don't need to accept the same thing 4 times.
But just seeing that before and after and being able to sort of be like, especially as so many of these things are just like, okay, let her rip agent to be
Yeah.
able to like actually visually see. It's like
Yep.
here's what that UI outcome of that like weird just text-based things are flying around left, right, and center, right? Back to like the vibe coding, and we're not like actually even like looking at the code. Like I think that is like the workflow that is like very exciting and desirable, right? That you get from the vibe coding. And that's why like I love seeing it kind of coupled with all of like the thoughtful infrastructure that you've already put in place here. And like and again, I have no horse in this race. I just think it's like really cool because like what you all have been doing for years and years has been like kind of getting just beefing up like that structure and that like helping teams go like, is this stuff good? And now that matters a lot more.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
there's one question like Lucas asked this and a bunch of people were like plus oneing it to themselves. They're saying, where do designers who understand code but don't code themselves fit into this workflow? I think that kind of gets back to like the democratizing factor of this. Like we've worked with a lot of different designers pre all of this stuff to help them get operational in Storybook, right? If you could copy and paste some code snippets, then you can you can
yeah.
stitch together
Absolutely.
your own product pages. And we've worked with
Mhm.
lots of designers who are like, oh, this is great because I no longer, have to say this too, and but it requires like, yeah, getting that code package like kind of stood up, getting that mono repo, Kyle, like sort of stood up.
Yeah.
But once you have that, then it's like you don't need to be a professional designer or developer. You could just be like, here's where you type in your instructions, do its
Yeah.
thing, and then like you can kind of do that like vibe coding, like that becomes your
Yeah.
interface to all of this,
Well,
and then you're able to see it like live in Storybook. It's amazing.
absolutely. Yeah. And I love that analogy too of democratizing and to add a little bit of color to that, like this gets a lot of the people that might not be in your code base every day a hell of a lot further. And
Yeah.
so if you're an engineer, like the last thing I want to do is like review a bunch of broken code or code that like kind of looks right, but it's like broken in ways. And that ends up becoming my job if in the old world, right? Like, okay, here's a prototype that kind of is okay, but then I have to review it and make it production. This gets it a hell of a lot closer
Yeah.
to production, no matter who is the person that kicks off the prompt.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, okay. I
Oh, I
recognize
love
that.
that point, Eric. It is a great opportunity for designers and developers to have a tighter relationship.
100%.
I just want to raise one question that came up in the Q&A here. So Yuntan mentioned that they have a design system that works with three different web technologies, Android, iOS. At this point, Figma is just a reference. Um, so this might be a good one for you, Brett. Like, where do you see Figma sitting in all of this? Is it just kind of like more and more going to the side, or do you still feel like it's a good like
No,
integral
man,
part?
like I think the reality with all of this is that there's not really going to be one right answer or one workflow that is going to eh, this is my prediction. This is me speaking personally. I think that you have, Figma's built up its own sort of ecosystem, its own architecture. They're very incentivized to kind of create a bunch of things that are useful to get people to continue like paying licenses and stuff for that. And there's probably going to be a lot of stuff kind of continuing to happen there. I think that there's stuff like this. There's new crops of tools, whether it's like the builder.ios of the world and those things as well. Like this is a moment in time where you have, like a real disrupt, like that word gets so overused in this world, but like this is a disruptive moment in time that I think that we can sort of say like with like a high degree of confidence that like the way that things are going to get done in this day and age and moving forward is going to be significantly different than what we've been used to for the past several decades of
Yeah.
of this industry. So, but somebody though talking about the different tech stacks that they're supporting and stuff like that, we've done a fair amount of work with this, and this is like really interesting as well, where you have yes, here's Figma. And for design systems in Figma, what those really are kind of like a contract or like it's a this is a promise that this component lives in code in some way, right? That's really what those are representing, right? The Figma library is like when you're dragging that button onto the canvas, what you're basically saying is, here, I want the developers to be able to use the design systems button, right? So that's always been the kind of proxy for it. And when you're supporting multiple tech stacks, right, that are all using the same design language under the hood, that could be really helpful. It's also worth saying that it's like you can just as easily that workflow that Kyle you just shared, you'd be like, here's that, and then it's like, okay, like here's the iOS and Android versions of that, or like the mobile sort of size of
Yeah.
that screenshot, and like that's it. So it's like the UI representation is kind of almost doesn't matter as much anymore. What is mattering is like the sort of that that coverage, the component APIs and stuff like that. What we've been doing with clients over the last number of years has been basically going, here's some YAML files or some markdown files, some front matter that basically like describes the requirements of what a component is. And now these agents are able to sort of like spit that stuff out as
Yeah.
web components, as a React library, as an iOS library, as an Android library, all following the appropriate kind of conventions that these LLMs are really, really good at translating between different languages. So we're kind of like getting to a point where it's like the source of truth just becomes like the essence of what an accordion is. And then there's like no real like kind of implementation around it. And then like it gets translated into.
I mean, in some ways, like you're describing like the structure that makes not the
Yeah.
artifact, and the structure is the thing that delivers the results. And some, in many ways, like if you've worked in consulting in the past, or which you have, but like in any type of consulting, it's like the process is actually the thing that delivers. Yes, there's
Yeah.
like work that gets delivered too, but like the process keeps everyone in line, keeps everyone like on track with like what people are trying to build. I do have a couple more slides here, and then we'll jump into Q&A. So let me just like get that all
Also,
started.
can I interrupt and just
Yeah.
demo one more super cool thing while we're still in
Oh
the
yeah,
demo?
yeah. Go demo. I know some people have to leave, but we'll continue on this, and uh, it'll probably be like another 15 minutes.
Yeah, so I just want to show here we go. So while Brad was talking, I ran one more prompt. I said test the interactivity of the form. I didn't mention stories. I just said test it. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to try to find some test files. Nothing there. Let's check if there are interaction tests in the stories. Sure enough, this project uses play functions. So let's do that. So it did that. It wrote a whole bunch of stories. It gave me links for them. Just going to pull that up here. So you can see now it checks for validation errors, interactive stars. And then I ran those component tests. They all passed except for this one, which interactions. Looks like we might have a nope. Okay. So anyway,
This is great.
I'm not going to fix the test while we're here, but you can see like
Well,
it
I mean, I
worked.
think the
It
point
made interactive stories.
I think the point here too is like it's running tests, it's saving it, and Storybook is like looking at the code changes, executing those tests again, and like while you're in the IDE, it just like ran the tests and then gave you the results, right?
Yeah.
Like in
Yeah.
Storybook, you can immediately see it, you can immediately mess with it,
Yeah.
And so the time between like agent correction and like test correction is like effectively zero.
And that's a hell of a lot more ergonomic than just like looking at a bunch of like red line diffs and like in console errors and stuff to like actually like have like
absolutely.
the UI there. Like that's huge. Again, it just like kind of brings it all like back to earth. I love it.
Yeah. And I guess like speaking of bringing it back to earth, we just shared how like our team and Brad, thank you for joining us, like how we think about agentic design systems. And as you said before, like look, the nature of AI is just not deterministic. So it really depends. Like things really depend. Like you run the same prompt 100 times and you're gonna get different results. And you should be okay with that. So your loop won't behave the same every time. And it certainly won't look like what you saw here. You have to do the engineering job and tweak it and like engineer it for your specific organization. But one of the tools that you can use is a new thing that we've created called Storybook evals. So evals help you benchmark your design system against a set of test prompts. And what is a set of test prompts? It's your test prompts. Like you create these tests, you run your design system and exercise it through these test prompts that it should be able to deliver on, and all of a sudden you can see things like quality, over time, cost, like in terms of token usage, speed, how well the code actually conforms. And so that allows you to really like understand when drift appears. Because again, this is a system. It's not like a static artifact that you can, it's not a PDF that you just like send to people and say like, oh, all right, this is fine. Your system is living. the tools inside of your system are living. So versions are getting updated, models are getting updated, everything is getting updated. And so you need a longitudinal way to really like think about like system performance. If you've ever worked in DevOps, this is basically observability. As a let me give you a couple of examples. Like we evaluated a dozen design systems so far, or dozens of design systems so far. And what we learned is that like every project needs to make its own trade-offs and really understand its own trade-offs. So the adage that you're probably familiar with, like good, cheap, fast, pick two, it still holds up here as well. We have both found that optimizing for good reduces cheap or like makes things a little bit more expensive. Optimizing for speed makes things less like lower quality. And the evals help you understand and make the balance very apparent. And when you run enough of them, like the AI starts to reveal some of its habits. So for example, like in this diagram, just having more context isn't necessarily better, or we are comparing like Markdown and XML, and we're running a bunch of evals, seeing where the results cluster, and then using that to make directional decisions. So it's not like 2 + 2 = 4. It's like, here's the spread, here's another spread. Which spread is like the most appropriate for our design system? I think the part that's like the most exciting for me is that this for the first time ever, like agentic workflows can actually quantify a design system's impact. So for a lot of people here, we've had this kind of ongoing discourse for the last 5-10 years about like, how do I justify this to leadership, to management? Like, how is this like good, right? And we get a lot of like hand wavy kind of vibe answers, like adoption like is good. I guess it's good in theory, but like, okay, does that hold up to like a deeper business analysis? Not really. And so on, right? Like you can kind of like invent a bunch of metrics as you want. You've probably done so yourself, but now we have like hard evidence in these evals. It's like you can see like how an agent performs with and without your design system. And that is actually a really great proxy, a natural proxy for like how humans would perform with or without a design system too. So while we can't determine exactly, look, this is how much more efficient humans become, we can now determine how much more efficient agents become. And if agents are the ones doing the coding, as Brad mentioned earlier, and we are defining the specs, that becomes very important in this next world. So with that, I want to kind of wrap up the kind of slide part of the presentation. I really hope that this serves as a starting point for you as you build your own agentic design system. I want to thank everyone in attendance. We're going to have a Q&A session after this, so hang on. You can follow me and Brad on LinkedIn at Brad Frost, at Dominic. You can follow Brad at a bunch of other places too. Just go to his website. I want to plug a book that Brad is, or a course that Brad is like launching in the new year. It's all about AI and design systems. Brad, you want to take the floor and maybe talk a little bit about that book?
Yeah,
All right, at the course, excuse me.
Yeah. So we're putting a course together with myself, my brother, and our friend TJ Petrie, who has been on and done a webinar with you all as well. But we're really kind of creating this course to help everyone navigate this moment in time. There's a lot out there. There's, the hype cycle is real. There's a lot of noise. All of the stuff is changing all the time. And so there's a lot of there around sort of like how design systems can be used in conjunction with this new paradigm in order to help make better products. So everything that we just kind of saw here, but we're also like just kind of evaluating the entire landscape. So looking at, the Figma side of things, and most importantly, just kind of like how the entire industry is kind of moving and changing. So we're the online course kind of, there's like basically self-paced videos. We're going to talk about a lot of like these core concepts, help people understand like, here's the ROI of these things, here's the benefits of them. So we're trying to really make this accessible to everyone, not just engineers and not just designers, but really to like anyone who's invested in the success of digital products at the organization, trying to like just give like some like level-headed, non-hyperbolic kind of guidance through this moment, but also kind of build a community around this as well. Just as we've already seen in the chat, all these people have said like, "Oh, I've been doing this and I saw good results, and I've been exploring this tool and this did some interesting stuff." So we're really kind of creating kind of a place. We're creating a community for people to be able to kind of, explore this terrain together, and all while kind of standing on some solid ground rather than feeling like it's just the new model comes out and everybody's freaking out and what do you do? Oh, this is old. This is, like what's durable? What are like
Yeah.
foundational concepts that are going to kind of endure even as the tooling, even as like the landscape kind of continues to change. So that's what we're up to with the course.
And I think that's been the through line for your career, Brad. Like you're thinking about the concepts, you're thinking about the structure, how to think about a problem,
Yeah.
and then you're leaving the kind of like how to solve a problem because how to solve a problem is going to change like
Yeah. But it's
often.
at the
So
end of the day, it's human beings getting together to build digital products. The nature of the digital products is changing before our very eyes, but also again, as we've talked about earlier, it's like the means and the processes are
yeah,
all under, being rocked right now. And
yeah,
that's, I think, a very good thing, and is a really important opportunity to help put more collaborative and communicative processes and stuff in place. And what you all showed off here today is again a great case in point that it's like the whole waterfall, and like the only way we really truly interact with one another is like assigning Jira tickets to each other or hitting a toggle switch. Like we got to get out of
oh my
that
god.
game. We got to get out of that game. And I think
Oh
that this is
man.
like a really great like opportunity to establish healthier ways of working.
Yeah. Let's take a couple questions from the chat, like to kind of end this off. Varun or Kyle, do you have anything that's interesting that folks have been asking for?
Yeah, a few folks asked about any recommendations on how to architect a design system to get it ready for MCPs and LLMs.
So I can answer part of that. That manifest that I showed, the reason why we built that nice HTML view of that is to help with exactly that task.
Yeah,
Because if your components have descriptions, if your props have descriptions with like JS.comments, basically all the things that made your storybook really nice and flush with detail, that's the same thing that the agent is going to use. So we try to surface where those gaps are, and we're going to
yeah.
continue to do that with automated tooling and such. But yeah, we try to surface those gaps so that you can fill it in and therefore make the agent more informed.
I think
Anybody else
it's
have things to add?
I, well, I think it's also important to talk about why, right? Because like a lot of people think, golly, like I finished this this accordion component, like it's done, it's good, I'm done. I don't have to think about it. But the thing is, like entropy exists in design systems. Things degrade over time, and so the component manifest actually tells you, hey, this part is this accordion that you worked on 2 years ago, 3 years ago, you didn't deprecate it, but like you don't really work on it anymore. Like the API is kind of out of date, and the way that you're representing the API and stuff is out of date too. So that becomes like a key part in if anyone's ever worked in like ETL, extract, transform, load, it's the transform step of like data engineering.
Uh, there's a question from Eric. One of the big barriers I've seen across separate orgs is design ops being a practice that isn't given the opportunity to show value. All this innovation feels like putting a greater requirement on design ops to be successful. Is this a shared feeling?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting framing for it, but I think that design showing value is is a very interesting thing. And again, I think that this is a moment where a lot of these worlds are kind of colliding. I think that there has been an unfortunate stratification that's kind of emerged over the years, which is here's design and design ops, and like that's all kind of like handling this, and then like any and all code is the realm of engineering. And I've always kind of, advocated for, kind of sitting in the middle as, it's called a number of things. We like to call it like front of the front end, but like UI
Yeah.
engineering and like that kind of stuff has always kind of like been that area sort of straddling the line. But again, because we're sort of we've we now have these brand new interfaces and these brand new ways of having non-technical people participate in the creation of actual software, of the actual UI, not just like, again, pictures of UI or like sort of further upstream kind of stuff. And like that's the only place where design can operate. I think that like what I would love to see is more designers and design ops people be operating in this world and like looking at these as design tools because they are. Like it's just
Yeah.
it's the opportunities are so incredibly like rich and many. And I think that like my biggest piece of advice for really like everyone in this moment is to like we're going to have to quickly shed a lot of like our preconceived notions of what certain jobs are, what they do and what they don't do, what lanes we swim in. And that's sounds scary. It sounds a little like fuzzy and ambiguous, but there's a way to, I think, embrace this moment to really like it's like the neuroplasticity of our organizational structures, and we just got like rocked and like the train just
Yeah.
jumped the tracks, and now we need to figure out like how we want to work from now on. So I think that this is a good moment for those design ops people who have historically been kind of one step removed from these kinds of like engineering worlds to get a lot closer because we can now.
I totally agree, and a lot of people in the chat are like, "Preach, preach." Yeah,
That's one thing I'm decent at is preaching.
um, there's another part too, which is like you know, we're as design system maintainers and design system like builders, our responsibility is kind of shift too. And Brad talked about structure as being that one of the core responsibilities. It's also like the validation pipeline and ensuring that like whatever as these roles compress upstream, like it still goes through the quality checks, the human in the loop kind of checks that are critical to merge,
Yeah.
because that's kind of what we're all
Yeah.
about here, and our job is now shifting to setting up these pipelines and setting up like the checks, the gates, the guardrails, the governance. Brad, you talk about in your book, at least the
Yeah.
governance
Yeah.
side of things too, but like now extend that scope all the way to an entire organization, or the UI layer of an entire organization.
Yeah.
That looks a
We
hell of a lot different than doing it at a design system level.
Yeah. But it's like we like to, I describe, there are many definitions of a design system, but one of the definitions that I really like is that we say a lot is like a design system is the official story of how your organization designs and builds digital
Yeah.
interfaces. And so it's really important to get that story right and to have the appropriate pieces and ingredients present in that story, right? Your UI standards, your design library, your code libraries, your documentation, multifaceted for all of those things, but also the people and the process, right? Like all of that stuff collectively
Yeah.
tells the story of how your organization designs and builds digital interfaces. And that focus on quality and that focus on the rigor at that system level is the thing that really unlocks that quality and efficiency at scale, right? Because
Yep.
Lord knows there's right this very second lots and lots of people making a huge mess
Lots
with
of agents are
with
making a
this
huge mess.
new crop of tools. And so it really is the coupling of that sort of thoughtful, rigorous, high quality architecture with this new generation of stuff
Yeah.
that is what's going to yield actual good results, responsible results, like quality results versus just like, you know,
Yeah. It just yeah.
make me a website. Oh, look, there's the website, but is it good, right?
Yeah, yeah. Is it good? That's the main
That's the
question
question.
of the hour, I guess. I think we have one more room for one more question, and then we should wrap this up. What do you think?
Okay, I think there's a good one to end on, which is what if we just lean all the way into the generative aspects of this? And Peter asked about this, like, do you see a world where we just like stop prompting and the UI is just generated on the fly using the design system components that you've created, so it's more contextual for the user that's actually using the app?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I mean it's like, like yeah, we're going to see brand new, product experiences. We're going to see brand new digital experiences. See this a lot with like Salesforce Agent Force is a good example of this. What they're doing is they have their Lightning web component based design system, right? Like Lightning 2 that they rolled out, and historically all of their stuff is just these like big just dashboards like punching you in the face with like 17 layers of mega menus and multiple flyouts. And for like a salesperson or whatever, they can now just kind of say, I want this. And then to have that UI built on the fly that has only the stuff that they're asking for. And the containers, right, that's serving that on the fly UI to the user is powered by the Lightning design system. So like that's really really powerful in that like it's very very clear. It's been abundantly clear for a long time that chatbots are a pretty terrible UI and interface for most things that a lot of
Yeah,
people are like looking for. So being able to conjure up
yeah,
UIs like kind of in real time and to be able to assemble them and invent them, like that's really powerful, really potent. It unlocks a next generation of digital experiences. But again, is it good? And again, so that stuff, whether it's like being conjured up on the fly or whether it's like more of a traditional like static interface, like you need to be able to answer that question. And that's what everything that we've been talking about so far is like that's why this is so important.
yeah. It's Google just released a paper on this, like a research study about the like people's preferences for generative UI versus just like text output from a chatbot, and
Yeah.
they vastly prefer like it when UIs are kind of customized to them,
Yeah.
like for learning purposes, for understanding uh, complex concepts. And I think
Yeah.
that to add to what you're saying, Brad, like really what we're if that world is in fact the future, we're building the constraint system to help guide the generation and then the quality system, validation system to help confirm whether it's good.
Yeah. And just so it's said, it's like there's such a like I don't know if we can even wrap our heads around it that the compounding
Yeah,
nature of all of this, it's like there's gonna be the old, there's gonna be the new, there's going to be like the things that existed before, there's going to be brand new things. And like that really does become our jobs is to just kind of understand like the landscape and to
yeah,
understand and embrace the fact that this is so multifaceted that it's not like the web is dead, this is the future, this thing is old and therefore outdated, right? Like things like email, things like voice interfaces and your Alexas and your Siris and all like all of this stuff like just compounds and combines and it unlocks a whole bunch of new opportunities. So we have this abundance of materials now at our disposal. And I think that it's like I really would love everybody to just not feel like we need to be limited by anything, but that we carry a big responsibility moving forward here to make sure that we're the ones that are helping answer that question of like, is it good with it
Yeah.
with a yes.
I think that's a really great place to end it, Brad.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Agreed.
That like this I learned a ton here. So thank you for having me. This is amazing and I feel very privileged. Thank you.
Yeah, we really appreciate all the things that you do, and it was just an awesome, experience to chat with everyone and that attended, and it kind of push this whole industry forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, total pleasure to have you here, Brad. And everybody else, thanks for being so engaging. This was really fun.
Take care all. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Cheers.
See ya.